What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? So, this might be hard to explain. I was probably 12, and lived in a big log cabin. One day while my parents were at work, I got in a fight with my brother, 18, who had some anger issues. He chased me through the house and I ran out one door, around our porch and in through another door. I was going to lock it behind me but didn't have time because he was too close behind me. So, I slammed the door behind me and kept running. When I glanced back to see if he had made it through the door yet, he was banging on the window of said door and yelling for me to unlock it. The door was locked and there was no he had locked it, because the door could only be locked from the outside with a key, of course, and our parents never gave us keys. There was also no way the door could have accidentally locked when I slammed it behind me, because it needed to be fully turned to lock, and usually required some finagling at the end to make it actually lock. I stood there dumbfounded for a few seconds and then ran to a bathroom and locked myself in there. Definitely feel that saved me that day. Edit, the door only had a deadbolt, which could only be locked from the outside with a key, but from the inside you had to turn the knob. Suppose I worded that in a confusing way. I don't personally remember this, but I would see my dead grandfather all the time when I was a kid. From the ages of 7 to 9 there was probably 10 different incidents. My dad was an absolute pansy when it came to ghosts, which I don't really believe in, and wanted to take me to the doctor. My dad had one of those bathrooms with a separate toilet room and no one that lived in the house closed the bathroom door unless they were bathing. I was playing RuneScape and my dad asked why the bathroom door was closed, and I said it's because Grandpa's in there. That's the only one I actually remember. There was maybe 2 other bathroom incidents and some incidents when I would sit on the floor and watch TV with my dad and he would tell me to go sit in the, what was once my grandfather's, chair and said I couldn't because Grandpa was sleeping. I don't know how creepy these are tbh, but they freaked out my family for sure. Probably going to get buried, but I met someone who no longer seems to exist. In October 2018, I developed tendonitis in my hand, so I went to see a hand specialist at my regular hospital. I remember the hand specialist really clearly. She was a really happy, talkative Vietnamese woman with straight, dark brown hair and glasses. She had a German-sounding last name, which I assumed was her married name. She was really nice and we had a long conversation about a medical conference that she goes to. She explained that my hand issues, caused by phone usage, were the hot topic of the conference and that she'd probably use my injury as an example when she goes there. Anyway, she gave me care instructions and sent me home. I was told to return if it didn't resolve in a few weeks because then I'd need to be re-examined and sent to physical therapy. It didn't resolve and I went back. I had an appointment with the same doctor, but the woman who came into the room was completely different. She was a white woman with light brown hair, no glasses, completely different face shape, really dull and unwelcoming disposition. I was so fucking confused. I asked her name, and she gave the same name the Asian doctor had. I asked if there was another doctor by that name and she told me no, it was only her. I described the doctor I had seen and she got annoyed and said she didn't know who I was talking about. I later went online to the hospital's staff directory and tried to find the Asian doctor. I couldn't. I have no idea what happened to her. I even checked my medical records to see if maybe I remembered her name incorrectly, but I didn't. Both of my visits have the same doctor's name on them. I've always been confused about this and it really bothers me that I met someone who doesn't seem to exist anymore. Edit. To answer some questions, I couldn't tell if the white doctor actually remembered me. When I told her that I was confused about the situation, she just looked at my chart, confirmed that my previous appointment had been with her, and told me that she'd seen me before. I wasn't under the impression that she actually remembered me. I didn't ask a lot of questions because she seemed extremely annoyed with me, like I was wasting her time and she just wanted the appointment to be over. I'm sure that I sounded insane, so I don't blame her for her bad attitude. I don't think the Asian doctor ever told me the name of the conference, she just said that it was a conference for hand specialists, so I haven't been able to look it up. Also, someone asked me if I was intoxicated during the first visit. No, I wasn't. I don't drink or do drugs. A lot of people have said that it might have been a student/intern/resident or a physician's assistant. My hospital doesn't have students except in the pharmacy, as far as I know, but I agree that it could have been a physician's assistant. I'm not 100% convinced because I rechecked the hospital's directory of doctors just now, and even though PAs are listed, I still couldn't find the Asian doctor, but it's 2020, so maybe she doesn't work there anymore? I also tried to describe the first doctor to the second one and she cut me off and told me she didn't know who I was talking about, but maybe she lied? Part of me thinks that this is like the Berenstein/Beristain thing, and at some point, I got switched from the Asian doctor reality to the white doctor reality. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine, and started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I've got several kids and night terrors are always a bit freaky, but once you know it's normal and what it's like, you kind of get used to it. But my middle child had something happen a couple years ago that didn't seem like it could be a night terror. He's almost 5 now and has been pretty advanced in academics for a while, somehow learned how to read the names of numbers and colors and such, and I accidentally found out one day when I caught him reading what I had written. He came into my room very upset one night. Night terror. Except he was fully awake. I know they can seem like they're awake but they're not. But I had him doing math. 3 + 2 is 5. Asking very high-level questions about things. He seemed fully alert and aware. But he was seeing something my wife and I could not see. Something threatening and scary. The fly was going to get him. He shrieked ear-piercing screeches, consistently turning away and back to the doorway into my master bath where he saw this thing that was invisible to me. This happened for a few nights, too. I could only reassure him that he was okay and nothing was there and we would protect him. "You're okay. You're okay," I'd tell him. He always darted down the hallway between his room and mine for a few days after this, reassuring himself by saying "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay" as he ran. Poor thing. Freaked my wife and me out completely. Might get buried but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike, both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. One day when I was about 8, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc., but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking, then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 AM and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 AM. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit and I found out they watched some rental movies and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away by the way. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was the car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at and I said just some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years. I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. Could not explain it and have never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. Well, my story is a bit creepy cause I lost myself. This was like 7 years ago when I was still in high school. It was a normal day, all classes went well till the math class began. The teacher was explaining the lesson and how it was related to the previous lesson we had the previous day. Everything the teacher was explaining was new to me and never heard before, so I was like, yeah sure. I wasn't paying attention again during that class, so I opened my notebook to check what I wrote about that class. I always write everything discussed during math class cause I sucked at math and my dad was strict about it, which got my teacher to be strict also with me, and found nothing about the previous class. I asked my friend sitting next to me to give me his notebook to make sure, and I found like a whole new material from the last class that I've never seen before. So I started investigating after the class, going around asking my classmates this crazy question: was I here yesterday during the math class? And they were like, what? And I explained the whole thing to them and apparently I was not there. I attended both classes before and after the math class and wrote everything of both classes in my notebook, but I have no memory where I was during the math class. And the schools where I live have a one-class system where students stay in their class and teachers come to them for the lecture then leave and the next subject's teacher comes and so on. So we know each other well, and everybody I asked said that I wasn't there during the math class. So yeah, I lost myself for approximately an hour. I wouldn't say that this was creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced. So, back in 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes, by Peter Clines. Now I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book I liked to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in this book was named Ilya, and, because I know someone named Ilya, and because the book is set in Los Angeles where I live, the Ilya in the book became the Ilya that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Ilya in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Ilya I know is a huge fan of. The Ilya in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Ilya that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to the Ilya that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Ilya knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book, with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles, and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. Weird but happy. About 5 years ago in November we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog my children grew up with, loved by all. At the next Christmas, at the end of the day of gifts, food and family, as I was picking up, I found a tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantel. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay, weird, but took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of that Christmas break, he asked if he could take the little figurine, to remember his dog. Of course, I said yes. A week or two later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son, and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No I didn't, it's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found a second figurine. Again, no one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on a shelf to this day. I used to have a recurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on the patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone, waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I'm digging in my wallet for a couple dollars, and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run out into the road I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while the dream stopped and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at an on the border, on the patio waiting for my food. A homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant but doesn't stop and ask for change. It makes me think about that dream though, and I start to feel uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out there but stop at the sidewalk and look out towards incoming traffic, and there is an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection completely unaware of what had just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everyone was fine. I was a young boy of 5 to 6, I think, maybe 7, at summer camp. The supervisors took the kids to a swimming pool and we were all swimming there. One of the supervisors was throwing kids into the pool. We'd splash around, climb out, and get tossed in again, which was great fun. It was my turn to get thrown in, except I forgot to take a breath before I hit the water and went under pretty deep. Now I was underwater and I really had to take a breath and was fighting the urge to breathe. I lost and inhaled. I swear to fucking God, I'm not making this up, but I somehow breathed air. I felt calmer and my lungs and body relaxed, just like I had taken a gulp of fresh air. I swam around underwater for a bit, just because it was so weird, but then I had the thought that maybe I shouldn't test or take for granted this thing that just happened. I should just count my blessings, so I went up and surfaced. The rest of the day was normal and I never told anybody. I should mention that as a very young child, age 2 to 4, that I hallucinated a few times. Once I was walking down a hall in my house and I started floating in midair. If I thought about it, or questioned it, I'd start sinking, but if I just relaxed and accepted it, I could float again. That only happened to me once, but I would have dreams where the same dynamic would happen for many years. Those stopped around the time I hit puberty, I think. Anyway, I don't know what happened that day in the pool. My first thought at the time was that it was another hallucination, but the part I don't understand is why I so desperately needed to breathe before the hallucination happened, and why I was so relaxed and calm and not panicky as if I had actually breathed afterward. I even stayed underwater for a bit. It was pretty surreal. I usually break this out when someone asks for a ghost story, but I don't believe in ghosts, so we'll say it fits this category. I have always loved exploring abandoned buildings in the American West. Mostly ghost towns, abandoned mines and such, but old ranch houses and other building can be interesting, too. In 2005, I was in central Nevada, heading for a week-long exploring trip. I passed an old house on a large, former, ranch property that I know had been inhabited just a few years earlier, but now appeared to be abandoned. No cars on the property, about half of the windows boarded up, etc. The front door was open, so after shouting out for any inhabitants with no response, I walked into the house. It had seen other visitors before me. A few windows were broken from the inside, and many of the few belongings left behind had been rummaged through and strewn about. I walked upstairs, and began walking from bedroom to bedroom. Pack rats had begun their takeover, and their droppings littered the floor. I walked into what was once decorated as a little girl's room. There was a cheap brass bed frame, and the mattress had been slid partially off the frame and onto the floor. Some clothes and toys sitting around would lead me to believe the girl was quite young. I peeked into the small closet, which was bare with the exception of a few wire hangers left on the rod. When I turned to leave the closet, there was a girl, around 5 to 6 years old, sitting on the bed, which had somehow had the mattress returned to its normal position. She said, "Hi, mister. What are you doing in my room?" I panicked, and immediately realized that the house wasn't abandoned, it was just that the family living there was living in extreme poverty. I began apologizing, and explained that I had yelled hello, and nobody answered, so I thought the house was abandoned. "It's okay, mister. Mommy isn't home. I haven't seen her in a long time. Maybe you could help me find her?" She stood up, walked toward the open window and sat on the ledge, looking out on a vast empty field of sagebrush. I asked her to come downstairs with me and we would go find her mother. She started to stand up from the window, but turned around suddenly and said, "Oh no, he's coming. I have to go, mister. He's coming. You should probably go too." She then kicked her legs over the windowsill and jumped. I raced to the window, and looked to the ground, expecting to see an injured little girl, but there was nothing there. I raced back downstairs and out of the house. I looked around as I walked back to my car, but saw nobody. She wasn't what I think of when I think of a ghost. There was no transparency, no foggy haze around her or anything like you would expect from a movie ghost. I still don't know what the hell I saw. I pulled into Austin, Nevada later that evening and met up with the group I was planning on exploring with. We went for drinks that night at a local bar, and after a few drinks they convinced me to tell my story to the bartender. He listened, and then asked me to confirm the location of the property. When I described the location and condition of the house, he explained, "Oh yeah. That's the old _ranch. Sounds like you had a visit from Nellie. She likes to chat with people that stop by. She's harmless." He then explained that the original owner disappeared in the late 1960s after leaving a note saying the family was moving to Alaska, so he could try his luck at gold mining in the Yukon. He was later located in Oregon, and largely suspected of killing his wife and daughter, however no bodies were ever found. His version of the story was that the wife and daughter did not want to leave Nevada, and left him somewhere along the way. I absolutely loathe telling this story, because I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, and I feel like I'm trying to tell a spooky story to a group of children. I went back to that house 2 more times before it was burnt down a few years back. I never saw or heard anything unusual since my first visit.